Turkish President Erdoğan full-bodied promises to fight the climate crisis at the UN, warning of new refugees in the same breath. But what's behind the change of heart? President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has gone under the climate protection activists. In New York, he announced the ratification of the Paris Climate Agreement, a milestone in Turkey's fight against global warming that the international community has long been waiting for. Yeah. But as is often the case with Erdogan, his motives are above all power political. With the climate offensive, he wants to counter a growing climate awareness within the Turkish population on the one hand and present Turkey as a great power that takes responsibility for the global community on the other. However, diplomats are cautious and, of course, skeptical about his speech at the UN General Assembly. Because one thing seems clear: Erdogan is not the Turkish Greta. Distrust is omnipresent and sometimes justified. Experience of the past few years alone teaches us that. The Turkish government had actually already signed the Paris Climate Protection Agreement in April 2016, but not subsequently ratified it. The background to this was the dispute over the question of whether Turkey, despite its classification as a developed state, can take advantage of financial relief for meeting the climate requirements, which are actually reserved for poorer countries. Erdogan spoke of injustices, but recently progress has been made. Turkey is one of the few signatory states that has not yet ratified the agreement. The others, Eritrea, Iran, Iraq, Libya and Yemen. Think about that. According to Erdogan, the Turkish parliament should now decide on ratification within the next month. In general, Turkey under Erdogan has relied on economic growth over the past 2 decades at the expense of the environment. Build, build, build was the motto there. The Turkish government invested billions in new bridges, tunnels, huge mosques and Erdogan's palace. Ecological concerns never played a major role. On the contrary, the AKP, that's the party of the Turkish president, tended to make headlines by having environmentalists expelled with clubs and tear gas, as was the case in 2013 during the protests around Gezi Park in Istanbul. The environmental problems in Turkey have worsened accordingly under the current leadership. Despite ecological concerns, projects such as the planned Istanbul Canal between the Marmara Sea and the Black Sea are simply being implemented. Meanwhile, the Marmara Sea is covered in places with a toxic slime, the so-called sea rot, which kills a lot of marine life. In addition, Turkey is planning another 40 coal-fired power plants. 29 are already in operation, said climate expert Ejmel Erlat from the Aegean University in Izmir to the television station Yol TV. The country continues to rely too much on fossil energy sources and does not have a green strategy, criticizes the website Climate Action Tracker, which is co-financed by Germany and up to 70% or something like this. In the Climate Change Performance Index 2021, Turkey ranks 42nd out of 61 countries, and its climate policy is rated bad. Erdogan has discovered the topic more and more for himself in the past 5 years and, for example, supported the planting of more trees, he says. But overall, Turkey is on a par with a developing country in terms of climate policy. On the way to climate neutrality, a complete reversal of the current course would be needed economically and socially. The country would have the chances. After all, it would be predestined for solar energy and, unlike Germany, hardly has any energy-hungry heavy industries. In New York, the Turkish president made climate protection the central theme of his UN speech. But Erdogan is primarily pursuing 6 goals. Domestically, Erdogan would like to present himself as a president who protects nature and is, in his eyes, God's creation that sells very well to the population. Turkey fell victim to devastating forest fires and a flood disaster in the summer. The Turkish government has since been attested by the opposition of inaction in the issue of climate protection. Erdogan himself was also heavily criticized. In the face of the climate crisis, something is changing in the Turkish population. A Green Party wants to found itself, but has been waiting for approval for almost a year. A new party could destroy Erdogan's dream of an absolute majority again, so he is now focusing on climate protection, which he has ignored for decades. That is why the focus on the climate issue is also motivated by power politics. Climate protection is currently an important topic with which heads of state and government can present themselves well internationally. Turkey also knows that, and knows that many Western countries are also constantly having to revise and correct their climate targets. That is why Erdogan's lips are more likely to make concessions. Just as Erdogan sees himself as the father of the country domestically, he wants to sell Turkey internationally as a great power that also takes global responsibility. This is also intended as a signal to the neighboring states in the region. After all, the country sees itself as a leading power in the Muslim world. The climate crisis also brings with it new flows of refugees. Erdogan often exploits the issue to put Europe under pressure. But the Turkish government is also afraid of even more people who might come into the country. By accepting millions of refugees from Syria, the country is at its limit and cannot accept more people, the president said in New York. Of course, the Turkish government is also trying to get financial support from abroad for the conversion to a climate-neutral economy. Turkey will not be able to cope with this exertion of its own accord because the consequences of the economic and financial crisis in the country are still glaring, mainly caused by Erdogan, by the way. In view of these many power political reasons, it remains to be seen how serious Erdogan actually is with climate protection. His announcements in New York received benevolent comments from the international partners, but there was no big applause. The Turkish government will be measured by deeds, but he always has a possible excuse ready at hand. As long as Europe and the USA do not meet their climate targets, Turkey will not do it either, not even with an alleged climate protection activist Erdogan at the helm. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.